Rutherford Issues with Bryan Barrett on News Radio WGNS, FM 100.5, FM 101.9, AM 1450, online and on your phone at WGNSradio.com.
Rutherford Issues is powered by Middle Tennessee Electric. Their charitable foundation is called Sharing Change, and it's funded by members who round up their electric bills to the nearest dollar each month as a donation and support hundreds of nonprofits. You can find out more at sharingchange.org. Today, we are going to be talking about dementia, Alzheimer's, those with memory problems. And joining us is Sandy Freeman. She is the Memory Care Clinical Director over at the Villages of Murfreesboro. And this is a segment for you if you have someone that has memory problems, maybe dementia, Alzheimer's, anything like that. You're going to want to listen in. Miss Sandy, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great. It is good to have you with us today. We are going to kind of tackle some things that you shouldn't say to someone who maybe has memory issues. Kind of tell us about that.
So, something I've noticed with the family members in our community, as we're all getting educated on this subject of dementia, is things that they're saying to their loved one, and things that we should not say. So I wanted to kind of go over, if you have a loved one with dementia, these are things that could trigger them to have behaviors or to get upset, and try to avoid it, and maybe a better way to reword things.
Okay, so maybe hit us with the first one.
All right. So the very first one I would say is saying, remember when? And I know we want to say that to our loved ones, remember when Dad did this or Mom did this, or you remember when our dog did this or did that. But the problem is they most likely probably do not remember, or they don't remember it as well as you do and able to tell in great details. So it kind of highlights the fact that they have memory problems.
Very interesting.
And that can get them agitated.
I mean, and you would think that would be a way to maybe help them, to remember things, but it can also, bring up memories that sometimes maybe aren't as positive and things like that. So that's really interesting.
For sure. And a better way to do it would be saying, I remember when. Mm-hmm. So you're saying, you remember, I remember when this happened. So that way, if they don't remember, you're not highlighting that they don't remember, you're stating you remember.
Sure. What else you have there?
Sure. The second one is, I've already told you that. When they ask you, where is my room, or where's my car, or where's my this or that, getting frustrated and saying, well, I've already told you that, and yes, you may have to answer the same question several times, but you just have to gather your patience and try to keep your frustration under control and answer those questions. Just continue to answer it. If they repeat a question, just answer it the same that you did the first time. Never say, I've told you this, I've told you that. One of the big ones that would be the third one is your brother, your aunt, your mom is dead. Telling them, reminding them, they don't remember past bereavements. Most of the time they don't remember. A lot of times in the community, we'll have a lady in her 90s and she'll say, my mom brought me here and these type things. You never remind them that their mom or that their loved one has passed. I've seen it a lot where a family member will say, Dad has died. And they're like, they're in shock. And then they have to relive those very painful memories over and over again. And while that is our reality and we know that that person has passed, they do not. So let's not remind them over and over again. And that's something that's very common. That
is very interesting. And I'm sure that a lot of people do that. So what would you do, if they said, how's Aunt Sally? How would you reply to that if Aunt Sally had passed away years ago?
Sure. And what you want to do is almost encourage them to talk about that person. Talk about memories of the person as opposed to whether that person is alive or not. that's kind of irrelevant in their mind, because in their mind, they're alive. So talk about the good memories. Talk about, oh, yeah, and then let them tell you a story. Focus on that part of the conversation as opposed to knowing that this person is dead. If they say, Aunt Sally came to visit us, blah, blah, blah. We've got a lady that believes that she's in her 50s, and her mother is constantly taking her to work. We're just like, oh, really? Your mom's nice and all this, you just have to go with it, and try to encourage them the positive memories.
Yeah, that's interesting. Talking to Sandy Freeman, Memory Care Clinical Director at the Villages of Murfreesboro. Some things not to say to someone with memory problems. What else do you have there?
Asking them, what did you eat this morning? What did you do this morning? Try to avoid any kind of open-ended questions with people who have dementia. Also, do you recognize me? That's a big no-no, and one that happens a lot. They may not recognize you, or you might look familiar to them, but they can't place you. So then it makes them very upset. Instead, just say hello, give them a warm greeting, make them feel comfortable to talk to you. And they may, never say, you're my daughter, you're my husband, you're my friend. And that's okay. But never say, do you recognize me? Do you know who I am? And do you know my name? What's my name? That's definitely not something that you'd want to say.
I'm sure that can be hard for that loved one, though, too. It's hard for them to, let's say it's a son talking to their mother and they don't remember that it's a father or their son. That can be hard, and you kind of really want to pull that out. But,
Sure.
that hurts them in the process.
Sure. And you don't want to continue on with that, because then that's going to get them, agitated or upset or feeling bad that they really don't know. And you say, well, I'm your son. And then they're kind of like, oh, and then it makes them feel bad that they didn't remember those type things, or they may not recognize you at all. So, just making every meeting positive, a warm hello. Not necessarily, you can even lead with your name. Hey, Mom, it's Barbara, whatever, as far as that goes. Another thing is multiple steps. Let's go, we're going to go here, we're going to go eat lunch, then we're going to go outside, and giving them this long list of things that you're going to do. And if they say, okay, well, how are you doing today? And you're like, well, I'm going here and there and here and there. And they lost you on the very first thing, because it takes people who are affected by this disease a while to process what you're saying. So if you're given multiple steps, you've lost them at the first step, and then that can cause agitation, confusion, short, simple sentences as much as possible. And the very last thing that's really important is to treat them with dignity and respect. People say, once a man, twice a child. And people do revert back to childlike behaviors. My mom put me to bed, those type things. But that doesn't mean that it's okay to say, oh, here's your little spoon and open your mouth and let me give you the airplane to put it in your mouth. You still have to treat that person who is an adult with the dignity and respect that they deserve. Using their proper names, not saying sweetheart, honey, darling, all those type things, which we're bad about in the South. But, as these terms of endearment sometimes, especially with the male population, that can get them upset. That can make them feel childlike. And that is definitely something that you would want to avoid.
So I've been popping up in my Facebook feed has been this gentleman who is documenting his life with his father, who lives with them. His father is in his 90s and has dementia, and just their conversations. The father asked his son, well, where are my car keys? I'm going to go get gas. And he said, well, Dad, you haven't driven in 10 years. And they talk about it, but I would assume some of that has to be, to know what things trigger that person as well, or make them angry or agitated.
Sure.
that whole interaction was kind of calm. He's, I didn't know that. I didn't remember that. That's
right.
And so if you can have some conversations. So I guess what I'm saying is it's all kind of very individual, I would think, isn't it, Sandy?
Sure. And, every stage of dementia is different. Every person that has dementia is different. This is just a generalized list of things that you probably should not say or go about saying in a different way. Everybody's going to stage differently. It depends on what stage of dementia the person is. Sometimes you can say things like, okay, Dad, you haven't driven in 10 years. But if he was a stage further and you told him that, it might get him agitated. Like, well, I just went to the store this morning. What do you mean I didn't drive in 10 years? So it's really knowing that person, knowing where they're at. And like you said, what triggers them, what doesn't trigger them. And I think that's why it's important to make sure that you are stage, go to the doctor and you're able to know what stage you're in. And then, going to support groups and those type things. So that you know how to deal the best with your loved one in regards to what to say and what not to say.
Yeah. Support groups, I would think, are very important for the caregivers, right? I mean,
100%.
Any ideas on, I'm sure that there are local support groups, right?
Yes, there are local support groups. We Remember You does a support group here. We're trying to get that off the ground. We've had a couple meetings. I know that we had one last month, and I don't know exactly when the one is for the next month, but I can let you know that. And that is, anybody is welcome to come in the community. And Leanne Hyatt with We Remember You does those support groups for us.
Okay, very good. Well, Sandy, some very interesting information today. I appreciate you sharing it with our listeners.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Sandy Freeman joining us today on Rutherford Issues, the Memory Care Clinical Director at the Villages of Murfreesboro. You can find them over at 2550 Willow Oak Trail, thevillagesmurfreesboro.com. Great folks over at the Villages of Murfreesboro. Thanks to Sandy once again for joining us, and thank you for listening in here to this edition of Rutherford Issues. Don't forget the podcast will be up shortly, and thank you for listening here today. Have a great day, everybody.